Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure Humulite. Trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest Humulite reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth Humulite. Learn more from Mind to Market by visiting blackearth.com.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Friday, October 3rd. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. Sean is away just for holidays for a few days, some well-deserved R&R. Don't worry, he'll be back next week. Joining me on the issues panel today, you'll hear from Tyler McCann, Managing Director of the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute, and my colleague Kelvin Heppner from RealAgriculture, based out of Manitoba. We've got lots to unpack. Plenty happened, and including Tyler and I were actually in the same place at the same time. Was happy to moderate a panel at the CAPI policy event that happened in Ottawa this week. So we've got lots to talk about from that one. And of course, if you are listening to this, maybe in your truck or on YouTube, head on over to realagriculture.com or whatever your favorite podcast app may be. Download the podcast because there will be a bonus segment at the end of today's show. But without further ado, let's get to it. We'll take a quick break and I'll be back with the issues panel right after this.
For decades, BSF has delivered trusted weed control to canola growers, and we're always innovating to help you farm into the future. Introducing new Liberty Amp herbicide. With 20% more concentration, Liberty Amp offers superior weed control with lower use rates, and it's backed by the BSF Performance Support Guarantee. Liberty Amp, it hits harder and goes further. Learn more at agsolutions.ca/libertyamp.
I'm Lyndsey Smith, host of The Agronomist, and I want to thank you for tuning in for over 200 episodes of our beloved little program. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube for our live and interactive agronomy Q&A. Each week, our guest panel will handle some of your toughest agronomic questions live, streaming on YouTube, Facebook, X, and RealAgriculture.com. Tune in Monday nights or go to realagriculture.com/agronomist and sign up for our email notifications and don't miss an episode.
Rhizosorb is the next generation of phosphorus fertilizer, demonstrating consistent yield results and cost savings to row crop producers across North America.
Unlike other products on the market, Rhizosorb has reliable and consistent results across crops and soil types. It doesn't cost more to use, and no changes to retailer farm operations are needed. Rhizosorb technology is not a biological or a biostimulant, but rather a soil chemistry approach to controlling the release of applied phosphates.
Go to phospolutions.com to find out more.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. Sean Haney, I heard, got fired. Just kidding. That was, of course, the going concern last Friday when I was not here. But let's bring in the issues panel. Sean is in Nashville having some well-deserved time off, so we wish him well on that one. But to break down the week's issues, the news, and frankly, a fantastic conference that I got to attend, we've got Kelvin Heppner out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, how's your week been?
Oh, it's been a good week. It's been a productive week. We've had some real summer-like weather here in southern Manitoba. So soybean harvest has moved along. Some farms are starting into corn around here. Soybeans are kind of wrapping up in a lot of cases, or getting to that point. And so, yeah, it's been a good fall week. Temperatures pushing 30 degrees Celsius, which will definitely take to get some work done at this time of year.
Mm-hmm. Gets those. Just a caution, Kelvin. That makes the weeds grow. Great time to get some fall weed control in the mix.
Yeah, fall weed control. Some of it by iron. That's happening. That's happening already.
We can talk about that later. Okay. Also joining us here on the issues panel, as he often does, it's Tyler McCann. He's the managing director of CAPI. And this week, Tyler, you are fresh off your 2-day event, policy event in Ottawa. I was also there. We have a lot to unpack on this one. But let's start with, you rounded out the conference with Arlene Dickinson. How did that go?
Well, I think it went really well. I'm always biased, but if you wanted to get some tough talk about where we're at in agriculture and what we need to do to deal with the risks in the sector, Ottawa was the place to be this week. And we, as you say, we ended it with a panel. It wasn't just Arlene, Simon Kennedy, who recently retired from 35 years in the federal government, and AJ Gill from MNP were there too. And it was this really, I think, frank discussion about, we do face challenges. And it was interesting, both Arlene and Simon referred to themselves as tourists that haven't spent a lot of time. They're not in the sector all of the time. They don't know it as well as others. But again, I do think about the sector all of the time. And I think the two of them had called a lot of the problems that we face right. And I think both of them called the lack of action pretty accurately too. And both of them kind of went to lengths almost to talk about, we have known for a long time what agriculture needs to do. Simon talked about when he was in the ag department 25 years ago and talking about the issues that we're talking about today. Arlene talked about kind of the number of reports she's read that have been written over the last 10 years that all call for the same thing, and yet agriculture struggles to get action. So it was, we got into a bit of that and what needs to be done to change to actually get that action to happen. And it was a pretty good way to end the conference. And I think the kicker really on what do we need to do to make action happen is were a couple of key takeaways. One, the sector needs to be clear around what it's asking for, right? We often get caught up in the complexities of the issues and the challenges that are there, and there's so many things going on. We're not coming forward and saying, here's something that government can get its hands wrapped around, and here's something that government can actually do about this. When you go to government and you say, here's our 20-point action plan, and here's all of these wild nuances that need to be fixed, it's hard for government to actually do that. And their regulatory reform was given as a piece. We should really be doubling down on, okay, this is what we want government to throw its resources at. This is what we think could make a difference. And the other piece was, I think, to be more honest and open about the challenges that the sector faces. Simon had made a comment that, sometimes you need a crisis to compel action. And I think Arlene calls it right when she said, we're in a crisis. We are facing an existential crisis as a country. Agriculture's got issues. Agriculture plays a role in that, and we need to do things differently. So I left the conference pretty fired up, Lyndsey.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, Kelvin, you were not there. Shame on you. It was great. Great coffee, Kelvin. And I know this is a big thing. If you've been listening to the RealAg team for any length of time, you'll know that me in particular. But Kelvin and I once had a show called RateMyFarmShowCoffee.com. And we should have bought the rights, Kelvin. We didn't. It was great coffee. Way to go, Tyler. But Kelvin, in hearing that list, in hearing those action items, and there are a few others I want to touch on at some point, from those three, so, having an ask, what do we actually want, regulatory reform, and being honest, and not wasting a good crisis, which of those three do you think will be the biggest challenge? Which one do you think is the most likely?
I guess the track record kind of speaks for itself in terms of how likely I feel, and I certainly didn't. I missed out on the energy that Tyler is feeling from coming out of the conference in terms of motivation on this. So I would say the regulatory reform might be the most likely. We might be in a crisis now, but there's a lot of people that still feel pretty comfortable where they're at right now, and there's a lot of inertia for the status quo. And we continue to see it politically in many different aspects in agriculture and broader politics. And in terms of having a specific ask, it's something that I think we're getting closer to as an agriculture community. But there's still a lot of different splintered points of view and differing, and we like to focus on where things are different, not where we all agree. And so I agree. It's inspiring, and I think we need more of this kind of outside tourist perspective, as they alluded to. I think we shouldn't treat it as tourist perspective. We should treat it as valuable insight into what our industry the direction our industry should take. The outcomes, I think almost everybody agrees on, would be pretty unanimous in terms of saying that Canadian agriculture and North American agriculture has lots of potential that's untapped. but it's a matter of how we get there, and that's the devil's in the details, and that's, I guess, maybe where my enthusiasm isn't matching Tyler's so far. Tyler can continue the rest of the show here.
Yeah, but again, and look at I sometimes get a little overly optimistic that somebody's actually going to do something, and we've talked about it over the show over the last couple of times that I've been on about kind of the lack of action that we've seen from the federal government and the need to do more. We did have Minister McDonald here yesterday talking, but again, I think that there's this issue of a crisis. The crisis is a challenging word. I think people in the sector get defensive when we talk about is the sector in a crisis or not. I think in the past in agriculture, crisis has been effectively measured by number of farm bankruptcies, and I think it is that kind of acute financial crisis. But I think the crisis that we're in is there's clearly a significant crisis if you look at the risk of their trading relationship with the United States, our inability to meaningfully diversify trade. If that really does come to fruition, that we lose that preferred access to the United States, we will absolutely be in a crisis. But we're in a generational crisis, and I think that one of the things that I guess that frustrates me sometimes is that I'm starting to get to be a little bit too comfortable with the fact that we're farming fewer acres than we have in 70 years. And that's not because of urban expansion. That's because of farm economics changing. That's because of pressures that are there. But if we were really an ag superpower, if you look at the growth in Brazil, it's because they're farming every acre that they can. Business R&D investment is declining and falling pretty significantly. If you look at the value of agri-food, our ability to add value to primary production in this country, that's falling. That's challenging. I mean, we can kind of go on, but a lot of the things that have been really good over the last 30 years, I think aren't as good today and may actually be really bad today. And we're riding the coattails of kind of 30 years of pretty good times in the grand scheme of things. And it's masking the fact that the direction that we're heading in is not a good one.
So, and I think two parts to this. One, this just huge shift in global trade, in global relationships, in trading partners. And this goes beyond, of course, our shared border. But realistically, I mean, we are looking at disruption and just some incredible, markets that were available that are not and may not be for quite some time. And trying to navigate that uncertainty is a huge one. The second part to this that Tyler, I heard at the conference was and it hits on the one of like, what are we asking for? It was identified several times, gaps where certain sectors don't talk to each other or certain levels of the value chain don't talk to each other or talk to the one below or the one above. We are really, and yes, we say silos, et cetera. No, it's more than that. We're just not very good, I don't think, at talking about very openly the opportunities out there and saying, who wants in on this? Who can help me with this? We're not great at it. And that I got a sense of, Canada does have on the agricultural side this incredible potential. We already produce. So this isn't like we don't need to recreate the wheel, right? We already have fantastic products, things that the world wants and needs. But there's also more we could be doing or more we could scale up potentially or process further. But what I heard from, and not just at this conference, but in general, we hear a lot of like, I can't find the people to do this. I don't know where to start with this. I don't know where I would get this. So Kelvin, from the perspective of asking for the same thing, it tends to, I think anyway, we sort of like land on business risk management because it sort of impacts everybody and we can all agree it's important. But is that big enough? Are we thinking big enough when it comes to what an ask might look like?
I don't think so. No, I think that's what like you said, we've been talking about business risk management for the last couple decades, and it all only results in usually tweaks around the edges. No major reform there. Never mind major changes elsewhere. And I think there is a role for government and public investment and public direction in certain parts of addressing some of our issues when it comes to bottlenecks in infrastructure and maybe in trade and that side of things. But a lot of this is the market, again, money flows, investment dictates. Tyler alluded to research and development budgets declining over time, and why is that? And how do we reverse that trend? Those are the types of conversations and things that need to be changing. So, yeah, I'm not sure that we necessarily always have a grand enough discussion when we get down to the nitty gritty about agri-stability reform and triggering payments and that type of thing.
But Lyndsey, Arlene Dickinson's apologized on the panel for simplifying things, and I actually think that we need to apologize for overly complicating things. I mean, this is this trap that we fall into about how different the world is. And one of the things that I took away from my time in the minister's office, where I got to talk to kind of stakeholders from across the country and from across the sector, different links in the value chain, is that like 80% of the issues were the same, right? Like there really is something to be said for the fact that we live in the tyranny of the 20% where we get caught up in the nuances. But at the end of the day, really, we need to make Canada a better place to do business, right? We need to make it a place where we're going to attract investment. We need to make it a place where it's easier to grow and farm. We need to be explicit that we want a growth agenda. Like that at a high level should resonate with many. We need more investment. We need more innovation. There's going to be differences, right, in how you do that. If you look at regulatory reform, everybody wants regulatory reform, but you get to a list of 170 issues. They're going to be different. But can we not double down and say, look, this is something that we're all going to rally around and say we want government to double down on this too? I think innovation should be the same thing, right? We know that that's what's going to drive the future of the sector. Can we not double down and say, like, look, we're going to set the 20% of differences aside and we're going to make this a priority? And it's frustrating when the sector can't do that.
I have many.
What about... Yeah.
Go ahead, Kelvin. We have to take a break, so make it fast. Yeah, make it fast.
I was just going to say, a lot of this often also comes down to turf issues where people don't talk to each other because of either job security or this is my turf, stay in your own lane, that kind of thing. And we have this unique perspective working in ag media and having this show, for example, every Friday where we talk about these big picture issues. We have a unique perspective where we can cross between silos and make those bridges and those connections. But I just wonder how we get people to look beyond their own job security or defending their commodity group that they're working with or that type of thing, how we look to the big picture of benefiting the overall industry and how we incentivize more of that type of perspective.
Okay, I love that. We're going to touch on that when we come back. But first, we need to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after.
Fall harvest has come, and every pass in the field matters. Tired of overlapping rows or missing spots? Meet the FJD AT2 Auto Steer System, your precision navigation partner this harvest season. The AT2 delivers 2.5 centimeter accuracy on any terrain. It comes with lifetime PPP correction at no subscription cost, no extra fees, and a full 2-year warranty. Start your inquiry today at fjdynamics.com. FJ Dynamics, precision agriculture tech for every harvest.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM. You've always farmed smart. What if you had more insight? Your co-op grow team can help you collect, analyze, and interpret data so you can make the best decisions for your farm. Plan for success in 2026. Talk to your co-op grow team today. All right, I am Lyndsey Smith, your host for the day. I've got with me Kelvin Heppner and Tyler McCann. All right, we ended on, and I want to tie this in, a really important note on I think it is really about leadership, about, being incentivized to push, to grow, to do more, to do differently. But there's an undertone right now that I think sort of has an impact on all of these discussions. And yes, we look at outward risks, geopolitical, trade, policy, etc. But Kelvin, profitability is also one of those risks and one of those concerns right now. And while profitability and land prices aren't entirely in step with each other, there's obviously a relationship there. And this week we did get the first half of 2025 Farmland Values Report from FCC. Overall, your thoughts? We had a 6% average, but what does the average really tell us?
Yeah, it's 6% average increase in farmland values across Canada in the first half of 2025. Doesn't really tell the whole story. It's the old, I guess, metaphor. You've got 1 foot in the freezer and 1 foot in the oven, and your temperature is still average, that kind of thing. But BC, Ontario posted a goose egg in terms of increase in farmland values in the first 6 months of this year, which, if you compare it to inflation and the rest of the economy, that's going backwards then in terms of value. Manitoba, this province, led the way with an 11.2% increase average value in land this year. So to me, the trend is still upward. Sure, it's slowing, but it's still going up, and there's still equity out there to drive demand for farmland when land is coming up for sale. And I think this ties in with last segment in our discussion about whether we're in crisis or not. I think the wealth that's been accumulated on farms on balance sheets over the last decade or two in the increase in value in farmland values in 3 decades, you could probably say, and that I think is masking or at least delaying the noticing of declines in profitability in more the short term.
Tyler, from the economic perspective, in looking at a slowdown in the growth, and it is, I mean, it's still growth, but it's a significant slowdown. What is your concern on that side? To Kelvin's point about profitability, but equity on those balance sheets.
It is worth saying, I think, that farmland values has got to be one of the most sensitive, touchy things for us to talk about, right? And so this is one of these things where maybe we'll get some hate mail after, but it's a challenge, right? I think that we live in a space where, for a lot of farmers across the country, an increase in their land values has made the difference for them, right? Has really shielded them from tough times, especially if you look at some of the farm income pressures that we're going to see in the grain sector this year or next year, likely. Like the increasing value of that capital is probably going to make a difference. But underneath it, there's a lot of things that you need to unpack there. And on one level, it is about what does this mean for farmers themselves, right? How are they taking the capital that they've got? How are they managing this? What kind of decisions are they making when they're investing in this land? We heard yesterday morning at the conference that again, farmers are the best first line of defense when it comes to farm business management, but most Canadian farmers don't have a business plan in place. Actually, if you look at the data, what survey results tell you is that adoption of farm business management practices went down between 2015 and 2020. And I do wonder how much of that is because we have had some pretty good times on farms. The pressure hasn't been there. But if you look at potential pressure coming on income, what that might mean for land values, there's a big thing there that needs to get unpacked. And I really do think if you look at what's going to happen in the next 10 years with generational turnover and what these high land values mean and what it means for trying to recognize consolidation. I was going to say prevent consolidation. There's going to be lots of people that are listening that do want to prevent farm consolidation, but again, if we keep seeing prices what they are, if we don't see any kind of more pressure on farmland values, and that transfer that's going to happen over the next 10 years is not going to be able to happen to the next generation on a lot of farms. It's not going to be new entrants that are going to come. It's going to be people that are sitting on that land base today that are just going to keep getting bigger. And so these are tough things that are there, but I do think that a better understanding of what's driving farmland value changes and what might happen. And maybe, I know that there was quite a flurry a couple of weeks ago over a column about whether or not we're prepared for a bust. I don't know if that's happening, but boy, I think we need to be a little bit more honest about what all of this means for the sector.
And Kelvin, we talked about that we are not suggesting a giant, loss in farmland values or a bust or those sorts of things, in that there are just so many other components to what creates farmland values where, or what sustains them where they are, is I guess what I'm trying to say. But they are an indication of overall, that meeting of interest rates, farm profitability, consolidation, demand, all of those things come into play. And it is a very sensitive topic. But I don't know that a farmer today who doesn't think they're also in the real estate business is then doing themselves a disservice, really.
Yeah, and to Tyler's point, farmers a lot of wealth has been generated as real estate moguls, even if we don't know that we wear that hat. Mm-hmm. In terms of the wealth and equity that's been accumulated over the last last 3-4 decades. So it's and this is something that government, when they're talking about payments in the U.S., an announcement potentially on Tuesday, or when we're talking about whether there should be ad hoc programming for commodities affected by tariffs here in Canada, this is factoring into some of those data sheets and analysis that's happening there in terms of figuring out whether a bailout is needed. And I think, again, it's masking whether we're in a profitability crisis or not. It's eroding that equity in the meantime, but how long we can last, that's something to definitely dive into and explore, I think, in the coming months. What room there is to sustain. Obviously, the FCC farmland values report today shows that there is still demand, and that demand remains fairly strong in most provinces for land, and we're not anywhere close to that tipping point yet.
Unless you're in Ontario, apparently. Just kidding. A no change, as FCC calls it, a zero, in real dollars is actually a pullback. But I would say, from my own perspective and my own this is anecdotal, I know. But we've actually seen for sale signs go onto farmland, which usually a lot of farmland changes hands long before there's ever a need for a for sale sign, right? So, definitely sort of feeling and I'm within city limits. So that, that's a whole other set of factors that go into that, but definitely feels like there's been a pullback, in that. Okay. Go ahead, Kelvin.
I'm curious why the difference between provinces, though. Why is it sought Ontario? I'm curious what the driver is of that. And again, opportunity cost wise, if you look at the TSX index here, I looked at it over the first 6 months of this year. It's up 9, 10, 11% in the first 6 months of this year. So if somebody was invested in Canadian equities, they had a better return on investment than the average farmland value, which hasn't been the case for many years in the last decade.
Yep. Kelvin, it's a good point. So anyone out there who has theories, let us know. Tyler, you wanted to add?
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago we talked about the change that they're considering in the U.S. to go from quarterly public reporting to semi-annual public reporting. Yeah. And I actually could have, an FCC releases these reports quarterly. There's a lot of things that are going on there, and I'm not sure. Again, somebody else that knows more about this may have a better opinion, better answer, but these are long-term trends, and the fact that in one quarter in Ontario we haven't seen any growth, but if you look at what's happened over the last 5 or 10 years and you compare that across the country, the numbers that they're showing may not be the best picture yet or the best way to judge what's really happening.
So, and I want to, this actually brings up one of the things that I really enjoyed this week, Tyler, at the conference was the speaker, and her name escapes me, so please fill in the blank for me. But we did sort of a mini workshop, Kelvin, on presenting data and presenting what's missing when, as an organization or whatever, when you present data, which visuals are useful, which statistics are actually, impactful when people read them, et cetera. And I think, Tyler, this is one of those exact examples where even when you look at, and I know why they do it, but FCC puts out, they've put out, so first half of 2025, there's a column that shows June to July, 24 to 25. And then there's right? So it's you're not comparing apples to apples, and it is a very short time. So you do have to take all of this kind of with a grain of salt as far as the absolute numbers, and you really do need to trend it over a longer time. So yes, but I found that fascinating of, how we use visuals or numbers or percentages to actually communicate. We can be very effective, or we can actually also at times just twisted in our favor. So there's that too. Okay, let's take a quick break because we've got lots more to tackle on today's show, and we'll be back with more of the issues panel right after this.
Kosher sucks.
Big time. And hate it. Really gets in the way. Awful.
But not anymore. Get a head start on tough-to-kill weeds like kochia this fall with Volterra EZ and Fierce EZ Soil Active Herbicide. Apply after harvest before freeze-up for up to 8 weeks of extended control in pulses, soybeans, and wheat next spring. Volterra EZ, Fierce EZ for kochia. Visit newfarm.ca/kochia.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Friday. It is the Issues Panel, and this segment brought to you by The Dirt. From nutrient management to the latest weather, market, and ag trends, The Dirt, an economics podcast, is your place for farm-smart topics to boost your profitability. Join Mike Howell on Season 4 of The Dirt podcast, available now at nutrient-economics, with a K.com. All right, I am Lyndsey Smith. I have with me my colleague Kelvin and Tyler McCann with CAPI, joining us from looks like a cloakroom of some kind, which is fantastic. So for those of you on YouTube, Tyler is this committed to the Friday show. He will do it from a cloakroom in a hotel. Okay, a few big news stories this week, though. So while Tyler and I were downtown Ottawa learning all sorts of policy things, Kelvin, sort of two opposite things, though. So we've talked about consolidation. We did get news a while ago about Maple Leaf Foods bringing back the Canada Packers brand, and that has moved forward. And then we've also got some sort of the opposite news. But let's unpack Canada Packers first. What happened there?
This was announced last year. Maple Leaf Foods, one of Canada's biggest pork and animal protein companies, planning to spin off its pork operations into a separate company. And as of this week, that officially happened. So Canada Packers is now specializing in pork production right from the farm level, the feed mill, through to the processing plants in Brandon and Lethbridge. They have Canada Packers now has split off of Maple Leaf Foods as of this week. They have around 3,700 employees, most of them in Western Canada, at those slaughter plants, and then capacity to process nearly 5 million pigs per year. So Canada Packers now one of Canada's biggest pork processing companies. Again, this is a brand that was around for much of the from 1927 to the early 1990s, Canada Packers was a big meat packing company in Canada, and it evolved into Maple Leaf Foods, and here it is back running as a separate company. Maple Leaf is retaining a small ownership stake in Canada Packers, and there's also a supply agreement that's going to see Canada Packers supply some pork to Maple Leaf. But in the meantime, now they are separate companies, both publicly traded. Maple Leaf is going to focus on prepared foods, consumer packaged goods. They still have some poultry operations as well. But Maple Leaf, I think, in many ways, wanting to get out of the volatility of the pork market. And again, in some ways, this one, along with the Corteva announcement this week, a move against consolidation back into more specialization in some of these companies that were doing a bunch of different things. They are putting more emphasis on focusing on different value streams within those bigger, broader businesses.
So, and it sort of feels like everything old is new again. And to that end, Corteva is announced this week splitting off or splitting between its crop protection products and its seed brands. Tyler, so Corteva just smashed them together not that long ago, now splitting them back apart. So, some of those familiar brands for everyone will be split off from the Corteva parent company. Tyler, your thoughts on what an impact like this might have?
Well, so I think it's always interesting, right, when you try and get in behind what's driving decisions when people are bringing businesses together, and what's driving decisions when they're bringing businesses apart, and And it is, I think that there was this sense, right, that there was this great business case to be made for being able to offer farmers a one-stop shop to really kind of drive that consistent buying. Kind of wonder what happened behind the scenes and whether or not they don't see some of that same benefit, or they weren't able to realize some of the same benefit at the end of the day. But I think that we take for granted at times the need for strong businesses behind our seed development companies and behind our crop protection product companies. And I think that it's easy to kind of make these guys out to be the big bad guys, but we need companies that are doing that R&D work to bring new products to market. We need companies that have reliable supply chains that farmers can take advantage of. We need companies that see enough growth and positivity in ag to invest and grow. And so, I think that, again, it's got to work in the seed sector for a time and learned about some of the challenges that exist in Canada. It's not always the easiest place to do market. There are a lot of risks when it comes to it. And you do hope that this new seed business that they're going to spin out again, we'll see some strength, we'll see some profitability, and we'll have some opportunity to do more.
Kelvin, so sort of building off the point, as you mentioned with the Canada Packers as well, is that, Maple Leaf spinning this out is a way to focus their business on where they want to be, but it does also sort of de-risk sort of the Maple Leaf business and puts it into, as Tyler sort of points out, a company that is focused on one aspect, potentially, of the value chain. Smart move, do you think, on the pork side?
I think in both these cases, there's a risk mitigation aspect to these moves, in terms of not having a negative impact in one part of the business impact the other part, splitting them off into two separate entities. And so, yeah, I think on the pork side of things, it makes sense. Let Canada Packers focus on efficiency in pork production and marketing that pork around the world, while Maple Leaf focuses more on the food consumer end of things. With Corteva and the spin-off seed company, I think, while we don't know if there is, we don't want to speculate, but we've of course seen kind of a worst case scenario when it comes to Bayer and the liability there around Roundup and glyphosate and the legal impact there after Bayer bought Monsanto. Of course, that's kind of a textbook worst case scenario now for a lot of these companies. And so on the investor call around this announcement this week, the Corteva executives were asked whether there were liabilities somewhere that investors should know about, and they acknowledge there is some liability around the PFAS issue, the plastic particles in the U.S. There's been some court case, some litigation around that. It sounds like that's all acknowledged up front, and it's not that I don't know that we can't say we know of any other liabilities that they see happening down the road that are driving this move. But at the same time, you have the MAHA movement to make America healthy again, and incredible scrutiny on a lot of crop protection tools in North America right now. And so what does that look like? Is there regulatory risk to the company? Perhaps there's a risk mitigation aspect to this deal along those lines as well. And I think that's concerning to us as farmers in terms of driving investment, as Tyler alluded to, in new technology, in new seed, in new crop protection products, tools, whether it's biologicals or traditional herbicides. If companies are scared to invest in this, if this is a sign, I'm not sure we should be reading it as that, but if it is, that's potentially a concerning signal to primary agriculture and the farm level, I'd say.
And Lyndsey, Kelvin talked about signals. I think going back to the Canada Packers case, one of the things that we heard today heard during the conference in the last panel was that there's a challenge in that we don't send the signals back well from the consumer to the producer. There is this disconnect in agriculture. We don't have this sense of how things work together. And in theory, that was one of the benefits of a company like Maple Leaf being integrated from that CPG, the consumer packaged goods, and to the chain to the primary production end as well. And again, what we're doing is we're putting a disconnect between those signals again. And so I think there is a benefit when you've got some competition along the value chain, when you've got some opportunities there, but there also needs to be an ability to have more of a common understanding or some signal better sent from one end of the chain to the other so that we know what do consumers really want at the end of the day and what does the sector need to do to respond? How can farmers take advantage of those opportunities? And when you keep kind of breaking these things apart, sometimes it makes it harder to send those signals.
If it's Supreme Court judges that are determining the science of what farmers can use, that signal should have been sent back to the farm early. Like that's like where we're seeing all these cases where it's courts and the and RFK type people sending that signal to farmers. That could have happened earlier, or there could be better communication both ways, I'd say, from the farm level to the consumer level to that point.
And we've just got to hope that it's not going to be the courts that are deciding animal health rules in Canada. So hopefully that the courts stick to their knitting.
Oh, they are, aren't they?
Yeah,
we haven't the ostriches here yet, but we talked about them last.
Yeah, can we? Well,
Sorry.
yeah, I was going to say, Kelvin.
Sorry, host Lyndsey.
Yeah, exactly. I was off for 2 weeks. I might not come back. Just kidding. It is a really important story. And all of this, I mean, the role of exactly that, oversight and our regulation and all those matter. But Tyler, to go back to your point of, I mean, and Kelvin's much younger than I am, and well, so are you, Tyler. But I mean, vertical integration was like the thing, right? Like that was going to make everybody in the value chain more money, and that's what every farmer was supposed to want, was to move up the value chain and be part of this integrated chain. But this is, especially in the case of maple leaf, this is, you're right, like a decoupling of that vertical integration. Is that, I mean, are there good reasons for it? Do you think this is the beginning of seeing more of that?
Well, and again, I think that it's interesting to kind of think through what the value play is for Maple Leaf and Canada Packers in this. I think one of the things that the Canada Packers team has talked about is it gives them an opportunity to pursue new markets that may not be fully aligned with what the Maple Leaf business is going at. So like there's some interesting dynamics that are there. But again, I think if you look at, we often hear that if only Canada could be as productive and as export oriented as Dutch agriculture is. I mean, it's often held up as the shining example, but it is extremely vertically integrated, right? Like these are companies that have extensive control over the business model. And it is just examples like this are really, really good examples of how one of the reasons why we don't have that is because we don't have the vertical integration. And that can be a good thing and that can benefit primary production. And there are benefits of the system that we have, but there are also downsides, and it does make life harder sometimes when you're trying to do things. So, and like to touch on that point, the entire CAPI conference this week really was centered around risk, was centered around identifying risk, managing risk, policy changes, trying to change what we do. But these are sort of some of the aspects or the ways that we can take risk off the table is by potentially being part of a more integrated value chain. It doesn't mean you're a vertically integrated company, but you're a larger part, or you're more invested and or part of a more integrated value chain. Kelvin, from your personal farming perspective, that is a key part of your farm. From a risk management aspect, like, how does that work into when you think about risk on the farm? How does being part of like a vertically integrated supply chain matter to your farm?
I think it's a constant evaluation that all businesses need to do is where the optimal or the lowest risk point is in that spectrum of being vertically integrated versus having multiple options. Usually the more vertically integrated you are, the more reliant you are on certain key business partners, and that carries with it inherent risk then too if something happens to them. So that's, I think, what these companies are doing, and kind of that rebalancing of that risk profile, reassessing it. And I think that's something that good business owners are continually doing, that reassessment process, or regularly doing it.
And Lyndsey, I should give credit to a CAPI director, Jason Scottheim, who was on the panel at the end of the day on the first day of the conference. And he made the point, because a lot of it was on risk management, risk mitigation. How do we deal with all these risks that we're facing? He made the point as a producer that he doesn't want people to take all the risk away. Like, he needs that risk, because risk creates opportunities, right? Risk drives better management practices. And I think that was, again, a good call out for all of the talk about how we need to manage and mitigate all of this risk that's there. It also creates opportunity, and it also drives better business decisions. And we need to not be afraid to have some risk in the sector.
It's a competitive advantage.
Exactly.
If you can handle risk better than your competitors, it's a competitive advantage.
Yeah, and it is. He did make the point, and I think it was well taken, that's just it. If you can take on some risk, a calculated risk, and there is opportunity there to potentially make more or move your company forward or move up the value chain, whatever the case may be. But there's risk in that, and we don't want it to be exactly that, zero risk, because again, risk and reward are two sides of the same coin. So yes, it was a well taken point. I think, for most people, when we think risk management, we're talking about the things that are out of our control, and the things that are within our control. Of course, we still want to be able to monopolize or maximize our payoff if we're willing to take that risk, right? Okay, let's take a break. We've got one last segment here on the issues panel, so we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after.
Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola, it's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
Whether you're running a farm operation, in a career within an organization, starting your own business, looking for your dream job, operating a company in agri-food, or want to hone your overall life skills, this conference is for you. Celebrating over 10 years of bringing women in ag and food together, join the Advancing Women Conference in Niagara Falls on November 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Visit advancingwomenconference.ca for more information and to register. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Friday. It is the Issues Panel. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. Joining me, of course, Tyler McCann, Kelvin Heppner. We had a few technical glitches, but we're back. All right. This week, big week for all sorts of different reasons. But one of the things I'm super excited about, I went back and looked. It has been since the spring of 2018 that Real Agriculture has had its RealAg hockey pool. And so with thanks to Cantera Seeds and Alliance Seed for sponsoring, we are bringing back the RealAg hockey pool. Everyone go realagriculture.com/hockey. Get your team in. It's with office pools. There will be prizes. There will be prizes for excellent names. Kelvin, I'll go to you first. How excited are you? Do you have your team? What is your team name?
I haven't made my team yet. I registered, but still in the process of figuring out the perfect team name that incorporates Leafs, Stanley Cup, and Parade in the team name. At least two of those three words. Somehow we got to work them in there. Or maybe Wendell Clark, reference to maybe the greatest player ever from Saskatchewan.
Good.
Work that in as well. So no, I haven't made my team yet, but looking forward to the season and following and all the banter that we'll have along the way.
Mm-hmm. And some chirping. During this whole time, I will let everyone know the secrets of my choosings, and it's ridiculous. But Tyler, huge sports fan, obviously, over there in Western Quebec. Will you be joining us? Do you have a team?
And so the technical issues that Lyndsey alluded to were when I tried to talk about sports, my computer crashed. So hopefully I can actually get through this time. Just maybe first, Lyndsey, a suggestion for Calvin's team name. Mm-hmm. No Leafs Parade. Maybe is that what you were looking for? Put those words together that way, Kelvin. So I may actually do this. I am in a fantasy football league. McCann Balls is the team name. I think pretty strong team name. Came from when I was at a league when I was in the minister's office back in the day, and the name has stuck. I didn't come up with it, but I've carried with it.
Yep.
But I found out, Lyndsey, this week that it turns out I have lost the last 2 weeks in part because my kicker was on the injured reserve list, and I did not take him off of the team and put him on. So I've learned don't play players that aren't playing.
There you go.
And hopefully with some of that knowledge, I can go in and compete and maybe be a victorious in the hockey league too.
I got to tell you, it's a strong name. I like it.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah. Okay. Kelvin, sorry, you were going to ask? Yeah.
Can we change players during the season in our pool, or is it?
I don't know. I think
pick them at the start. And
I think there's a trade deadline, quote unquote.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm sure there are words to that effect. If I remember correctly, there are, but I don't think it's like we can't all season, but you can.
And you don't have to do the weekly thing like like football. You don't have to make your picks
No,
week.
you don't have to. And so what we will be doing, though, for all of you, is we will be on, I believe it's going to be Mondays. We'll be sharing the stats here on the radio show, but also, of course, over on realagriculture.com/hockey. So check it out. Join us. I do believe for prizes, or for the grand prize, you have to be a Canadian resident. Just keep that in mind. For monthly prizes, I'm not so sure. We'll look into that. Okay. Maybe.
I will tell you, Lyndsey, that you learn who your friends are in the league when you're playing guys that know that you're playing a kicker that is not actually playing.
That is
and
correct.
Don't say anything to you about it. So
yes, and for 2 weeks they let you do that. Okay.
Yes, good. Thank you. Big thanks to Dustin Pike.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. To round out the show, one of, I think, my favorite sort of observations or questions from this week on the policy front in talking about risk, et cetera. We had a discussion about, and when we started off the show, we talked about, or Tyler mentioned that Arlene said, what are you asking for? What is your ask? What are you bringing forward for an industry? And one of the questions, and I believe it was Brian Gilvesi with Alice, who was on the panel that I moderated, he sort of touched on that right now the talk for our federal government is all about nation-building projects. We've got this list. There's a secondary list. We talked about on this show how, nothing on there is exclusively for agriculture, and maybe nothing super specific to agriculture either. And I will say I agree with the premise that when, an organization or a grant or some sort of contest tells you, here's what we want, usually you're more successful if you give them what they want. So, Kelvin, my question to you, and Tyler, same to you as well, but I'll start with Kelvin, is if we had what we would pitch as a nation-building project that was agriculture specific, what would it be, or what should it entail?
I'm not sure mine would be a thing, and I'm not sure mine would fit the definition of this list, because it would be, and we've heard politicians use this term often, government getting out of the way. It would be a focus on adding an economic lens to things, boosting productivity, boosting output, and so that's likely in the realm of cutting red tape. I'm not sure that fits in a nation-building projects per se, but I'm a little worried that we're moving in the direction of a lot of other countries in being more statist in terms of state controlling and picking winners and losers, and picking companies that are going to come out on top, and rather than letting supply and demand in the markets determine who should win and who should lose. And so to me, if there's ways of government as part of this nation-building effort doing that, I think that goes a lot further and builds a lot more resiliency into our economy than picking, for example, electric vehicle plants or battery plants or certain sectors or companies to be winners. And then when they flop, then it impacts everybody, and you're that far behind, rather than having the market have worked on many different things at the same time.
I like it. Tyler?
I don't like it, Lyndsey. One of the things that Ed Greenspan, who is, he said in our one of our panels on Wednesday was, and so Ed has been around as a longtime Globe and Mail journalist, editor, was at the Public Policy Forum, has been watching kind of how the world works for a long time. Talked about kind of changes that are out there, and some of the things that he talked about are, again, this kind of these global tensions. These are things that aren't a huge surprise, but he had on his list one of the big things that's changing is industrial policy is back. So governments around the world, Kelvin, are being statist. Like we can try and be Boy Scouts, but what we're going to do is miss out on opportunities. We're not going to get to take advantage of the things that we could. So I think that there are things that we could do. If we could figure out irrigation on a broader scale in Western Canada. I know the Saskatchewan government's been talking about this for a long time. The Alberta government's been looking at it too. How do we do that bigger? How do we try and actually get more of these crush plants built? Kelvin kind of poo-pooed the idea of an electric vehicle plant, but if I was a canola farmer that was concerned about market access to China, I would be saying, how do we get more of this crush and processing capacity built in Canada? I think that there are opportunities for us to talk about specific projects, but again, that's sometimes not a popular thing to do in agriculture, but if the world is moving in this direction, why don't we take advantage of it and do things that will better position the sector for success in the long term?
I think if the world's moving in that direction, Canada's competitive advantage can be doing the opposite, can be not doing it.
So, well, and I think...
Well, Kelvin...
go ahead, Tyler.
We can do more than one thing at a time, right? The government's focused on major projects and regulatory reform. So I don't think, Kelvin, saying, look, we see the potential for big projects means that we're not going to do anything other places. And one of the things that was pointed out was that the major projects office that the Prime Minister has announced that they're moving forward, part of the work that it's doing is dealing with regulatory issues and making it easier to get these projects actually to happen. But part of it's also dealing with investment attraction, right? And I think that part of it, that financing part, again, is a theme that we heard kind of over and over again. Regulatory reform is an issue, but so is capital and getting capital into the sector. And so if we see this potential to try and drive more capital into agriculture to deal with these competitiveness issues, and we get to focus attention on a couple of big projects, I don't see, why are we not doing that?
But that capital's got to come from diverse sources, not just the federal government's deficit.
Well, or, Kelvin, you could be like Alberta and announce that, and this is just so not Alberta, but announce that you will be the proponent of the pipeline that does not have a proponent. I was very surprised by that.
But that is where government has a role in terms of unlocking a public good where there isn't a private interest is doing it. So at least, as little as possible. But that is the role.
Mm-hmm. Tyler?
I just think it's good. Well, no, it's not that I disagree. It's that I think that that may be driving home to the point that there isn't a business case for a pipeline of the country, right? And I think that sometimes, especially for the Western audience, may be hard to handle, and they may not agree. But if the government of Alberta is doing this, they're doing it because nobody else will, and that speaks to kind of like some bigger issues and one of these like honest truths that we need to deal with.
Or is it the reason there isn't a proponent is because there's legislation, regulation, et cetera, in the way, which is the argument that Alberta would say is that they're willing to be the proponent until some of these, bills or whatever move out of the way so that investors actually see a path forward. So, I mean, you can make that argument, yes, that, there isn't maybe a private proponent, but to that point of bigger issues, are there things that are essentially making Canada less desirable to invest in? And therefore, that's what ends up happening is that public money goes into some of these things. And does it get it to a certain point and then private money flows? Potentially. Tyler?
And one of the faults with the approach with the major projects office of the federal government is that they didn't change the rules for everybody, right? They didn't deal with competitiveness issues across the board. They are dealing with competitiveness issues for these select projects. I think the government says it's partly because it gives them more time or breathing space to kind of more comprehensively fix the rules for somebody else. But I do worry that it takes the pressure off, and we shouldn't think that we've actually fixed the problem when we're doing it the way that they're doing it.
And we are out of time, but I completely agree that if we're going to make it easier or better for these certain projects, why are we not making it easier and better for everybody? Okay, Kelvin, Tyler, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining me here on the show.
Thank you.
Go Blue Jays.
Alrighty, and I'll be back Monday for Agronomic Monday here on Real Ag Radio. Cheers, everybody. Welcome to the bonus segment, everybody, where we talk about what we didn't talk about. Tyler, you are all excited about this aspect, so I'll go to you first. What did we not talk about on the show today?
Oh, darn it. I was all excited about a bonus segment. And
I don't know.
Lyndsey has called me out. What did we not talk about? Oh, heavens. You know what? Here's a couple of things that we didn't talk about. I mean, one, I will just say in passing because... U.S. government shutdown, and we know that is a big issue in the United States, but it is there are impacts in Canada. I think Kelvin may have made a reference to this earlier. The bigger thing coming out of the United States that has, I think, bigger consequences for Canada is it looks like there is a big aid package coming. It looks like by this time next week we will know what that looks like, and there are, I think, lessons that Canadian farmers should learn. I think there's going to be a temptation to look at what will probably be a very big number next Tuesday, and Canadian farmers go, we want that. How come we won't get that? I bet canola farmers will feel pretty pissed off that the Canadian government isn't offering it. But Be careful what you wish for sometimes. And I'm not sure that this is the right answer is to go out with big bailouts. I think if you look at what's happening in the United States, it really does seem like the government is making things worse. And I think that a trade war is never a good thing. I think most U.S. farmers know that. They seem to be kind of throwing gas on the fire with what they're doing with Argentina now and kind of the impact that it's having on U.S. soy farmers. I'm sure that this money, this bailout that they're offering U.S. farmers will take some of the pressure off. But boy, it's not a good position, and it's people will celebrate it. And I really think that we need to take a minute and say, look, this is a bad thing for a bad situation, and we need to fix the underlying issues that are actually doing with farm profitability.
Mm-hmm. Kelvin, your thoughts?
I agree. The shutdown, I think there's lots of potential impacts, and potentially the shutdown is going to block these payments or progress on however these payments are going to be made. But yeah, expecting it'll be announced on Tuesday, and then the expectation, I think, is that these actual payments would come in the last quarter, maybe first quarter of next year. And there's still big question marks about how they're going to actually, what the mechanism will be for sending these payments out, where it's going to come from, whether it'll be through the CCC, through the Commodity Credit Corp. Those funds have apparently largely been depleted. There's talk about maybe being $5 billion out of the $30 billion left that USDA can access there. So whether they have to get creative and whether the courts get involved then in terms of defining roles and who can access that funding and whether it can be sent out and whether the Trump administration just goes ahead with it. There's a lot of question marks, I think, still to be answered and addressed in terms of what this payment will look like. And it sounds like on Tuesday, according to Scott Bessent, that's when the announcement will be coming. And also whether it's just for soybeans or whether other crops will also be included in that, whether sorghum and cotton and other commodities that are also in the black or in the red right now will also be affected or be included in those program or support payments.
Kelvin, and did we not hear from, I know we talked on the New World Screwworm thing a few weeks ago. Was there not mention of potentially something about funding going to beef producers to rebuild the cow herd? I mean, that's a sector that, obviously the screwworm thing, incredibly important. It is creating a lot of disruption in cattle flows, which is really important. But cattle prices are pretty good. So I find this one a bit of a head scratcher.
I think that one's been shot down already. There was talk about it, about a heifer retention incentive, and that one has been. I'm pretty sure it's not going anywhere. So, like you said, and this is further to the point that Tyler was making. Government payments from the mailbox are not sustainable for building a business or plan around, and so to me, in many ways, these types of support payments buy you a little more time, but potentially make things worse when stuff hits the fan eventually. If you've just been getting by with government support, and then all of a sudden it dries up or the tap turns off, that can make the situation a lot worse. Again, our land value appreciation over the last few decades is buffering that in the meantime, but it remains to be seen how long that lasts.
Kelvin, so from your perspective, what did we not talk about, and is it only the Blue Jays? Because you talked about it last week. We don't have to talk about this week.
Oh, but now they're AL East champs and to ALDS here. So yeah, looking forward to watching ball. But one thing that ties in with Alberta and being a proponent for this pipeline, and Tyler raised the prospect of there maybe not being a business case for this. We continue to see this isn't really directly tied to agriculture, but I think it impacts what we talk about here a lot. OPEC continues to talk about, or there's continues to be rumors of OPEC opening up production. Right. And increasing oil price or increasing oil supplies, driving prices lower. That's going to hurt the prospects of a nation-building pipeline project, and it will also continue to buffer any increase to inflation or offset increases to inflation in other areas south of the border in the U.S. And so, a lot of our trade issues, the pain of inflation is ultimately what is going to stop the Trump administration. Or serve as a check and balance to the Trump administration's approach on tariffs and trade restrictions. And if declining oil prices, if energy prices continue to decline, that's going to buy the Trump administration more time before pain sets in for more of the U.S. economy.
But but it may have different impacts in Canada if it drives the Canadian dollar down more. Again, that may offset some of that export challenge that we have, but it may impact our costs and other products as well. And
government revenues will be down.
Yeah. So there's like big challenges there. Just what we'll say on a sports note quickly. We haven't talked about Canadian women rugby players, and I've got some good women rugby players in my extended family, and we watched the Rugby World Cup final last Saturday, and Canadian women couldn't pull it out, couldn't beat England in the end, but they fought a good fight, and good to see women doing well in the rugby front.
I'm just going to say in general, rugby is fantastic viewing, and women's rugby, I think, is deservedly having its moment, which I think is really cool. Tyler, we just had to figure out which sport you watched. That's it.
Well, but should have maybe thought of that one earlier. And maybe here's kind of the fighting words. When you do watch sports like football, and especially baseball, boy, they're a lot slower than rugby is. And, I don't know. Maybe that's why I can't handle a baseball game, because there's not that much happening. But stuff never stops when you're watching rugby.
I know. My oldest has played rugby, and it is fantastic, but my hat goes off to her because I still don't entirely understand it. So there you go. There's 7s and 15s. Like, I don't know. Anyway, so there you go. But it's, very cool. Good job, Tyler. Okay, we're going to end it there. Just a quick bonus this week. For all of you on the podcast stream, thank you so much for downloading the podcast. You can, you know what we should do, Kelvin, every week is we should remind people to, download the podcast, but also give us a rating and 5 stars and give us a follow and the thumbs up. All of those.
Subscribe.
Yeah. Like and subscribe. Like on YouTube. There you go.
They should give the 5 stars. Feel free to make comments, especially if they're bad ones about Kelvin.
Yeah, there you go. Or the Maple Leaf. Exactly. If you have good news, great feedback and encouragement, lsmith at RealAgriculture.com. Any arguments for today's show, shaney@RealAgriculture.com.
Especially if you want to point out that the show's better when Sean's not on it. Feel free to send Sean that email.
Okay, yes. Could you? Anyway, job security for me and Kelvin. All right. Okay, cheers everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.